Welcome to the Ginger Wizard Productions Podcasting Masterclass, Episode 4. Okay, so by now you should hopefully have noticed I use a bit of music in this show. Here it is. Now, to be perfectly honest, you could do your podcast without music. Totally fine, admirable, a big thumbs up from all of us here in the podcasting world. But beware, it can leave your wonderfully thought out and painstakingly produced podcast, try saying that quickly, feeling what we call in the industry a bit dry. Music can add so much to what you're trying to convey. It can set tone, pace and emotion, sometimes all in one go. So getting it right is really, really important. Let me give you a few examples. I'm going to use the same words but change the music and see how each of them changes the feel of those words. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. I've found a bit of free online text on the old internet there, and I'm going to read out this text and I'm going to change the music underneath it 3 times. So we'll get 3 different feelings from the music. And although this may seem quite obvious, I think it's worth saying and worth demonstrating here because it really will hit home. Okay, so here we go. This is from a passage called The Gold That Glitters, and it's taken from a book called The Philistine, a periodical of protest by various authors if you're interested, and it's free to read on the internet. Okay, right, here we go. There lived once in the East a great king. He dwelt far away, amongst the fragrant fields of roses and in the light of the suns that never set. He was young, he was beloved, he was fair face and form, and the people, as they hewed stone or brought water, said amongst themselves, Verily this man is a god. He goes where he lists, and he lies still or rises up as he pleases. And all fruits of all lands are called for him, and his nights are nights of gladness, and his days, when they dawn, are all his to sleep through or spend as he will. All right, so first of all, let's have a listen to that with a big, cinematic, chunky soundtrack. Here we go. There lived once in the East a great king. He dwelt far away, amongst the fragrant fields of roses and in the light of the suns that never set. He was young, he was beloved, he was fair face and form, and the people, as they hewed stone or brought water, said amongst themselves, Verily this man is a god. He goes where he lists, and he lies still or rises up as he pleases. And all fruits of all lands are called for him, and his nights are nights of gladness, and his days, when they dawn, are all his to sleep through or spend as he will. Now let's get all soppy and listen to it in a rather more romantic kind of way. There lived once in the East a great king. He dwelt far away, amongst the fragrant fields of roses and in the light of the suns that never set. He was young, he was beloved, he was fair face and form, and the people, as they hewed stone or brought water, said amongst themselves, Verily this man is a god. He goes where he lists, and he lies still or rises up as he pleases. And all fruits of all lands are called for him, and his nights are nights of gladness, and his days, when they dawn, are all his to sleep through or spend as he will. And finally, a cheeky, silly little song that I've found. Let's see how it plays with that. I've got a feeling this won't work, but let's have a go. There lived once in the East a great king. He dwelt far away, amongst the fragrant fields of roses and in the light of the suns that never set. He was young, he was beloved, he was fair face and form, and the people, as they hewed stone or brought water, said amongst themselves, Verily this man is a god. He goes where he lists, and he lies still or rises up as he pleases. And all fruits of all lands are called for him, and his nights are nights of gladness, and his days, when they dawn, are all his to sleep through or spend as he will. Actually, I think that music works brilliantly with it. But you see, that those three very different types of music just gave that such a different feel each time. So that's something really to consider. Often a lot of people will just put music on their podcast because they think they need to. But really, there's a lot you're doing there with the music. You're kind of punctuating your speech. You're highlighting the emotion that you're trying to make the listener feel. And it's just so hugely, hugely important. Let's get the insight of somebody who knows all about podcasting and music. He is a writer, composer, performer, an all-round, actually nice guy, Jake Yapp. Hello, Jake.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I mean, not all round. There are some bits. If you go all the way round, no, it's not nice.
What facets of you are the least appealing? Because instantly people are going to want to know.
Do you know? If you want me to, full disclosure, It's chaos. I read a really good article, and it said, "Here's a really great psychological theory, which you should immediately discard, as this has been come up with by people with no professional qualification to do so whatsoever." But there are in the universe of the Muppets, there are two types of Muppet. Have you heard about this?
No, I want to know.
There are order Muppets and there are chaos Muppets, right? So an order Muppet, Kermit the Frog.
Right, yeah, you know, it's very sensible, yeah.
Or in Sesame Street, because it's the universe of the Muppets. Bert. Chaos Muppets, Fozzie, Miss Piggy, Animal.
Gonzo? Yeah.
Beaker?
Yeah.
Order.
There must be an in-between Muppet. There must be.
There is no in-between Muppet. And you have to work out what kind of Muppet are you. And I am a Chaos Muppet. And somebody, but you know what's really interesting is that when it comes to music, it's complete discipline. It's the one field of work I do where hours, days can pass and I don't notice, and I am utterly focused on it. It's the one thing that keeps me on track. And I love it. You
do have a rather lovely CV, actually, one that many people would be enviable of, I think. Let's talk through what you've done. There's a podcast out with you on it at the minute, I think, isn't there?
So Pillar of Salt is a John Holmes co-production, and I did some voices on that. John Holmes is the only person who considers me a vocal actor and hires me accordingly, mainly because I'm cheap. And it's a lot of fun. I've done a few projects with him. I've done quite a few podcasts with him. I did a series called Cold Case Crime Cuts, which, if you haven't heard it, it's worth checking out. It's sort of a bit like Serial, you know, the most infamous of all the podcasts, a sort of murder mystery journalistic investigation. But it's asking all the big questions, like, who shot who at the Copacabana, and other questions infamously preserved in pop music. And I did do some voice acting on that, but I also did the music, most of the music for that, which was a lot of sound alikes that I had to do.
So that's interesting. So you're getting work making stuff that sounds like other stuff because. And I was going to get to this later in the podcast, but actually, if you want to use, and I don't mean this in an awful way, but if you want to use real music in podcasts, it's very expensive, isn't it? So you're getting a lot of work recreating this in a cheaper way.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you can license if you want to use the Beatles, you can license them. Word. But well, good luck. I mean, it's going to take.
No, you distracted us there from. Your wonderful career, because it's not just that you've done. You've done tons of other stuff.
I mean, yes, I did. The thing that's probably the standout on the CV is I was on Charlie Brooker's Weekly Wipe, where I condensed TV shows down into 90 seconds. I also did a series for Dave called The Hurting, which was a very, very, I was told, very cheap clip show. And the commissioning editor said, look, it's just people falling off hoverboards. Remember them? But I feel like maybe we could do something with it. What could you do with it? So he gave me a show, and I stripped out the soundtrack completely re-scripted it and revoiced it. But I also redid all of the music, and I kind of almost composed it. So I ended up doing 2 series of 40 shows per series of that. And I generally wrote a new song most episodes.
How is that? Because I play the guitar, right? And I think my creativity dried up. I'm 43. I think it dried up genuinely at about 22. I still pick it up and play it a bit. But I think I plumbed the well, and that was the end of that. How deep is your well? Is it still wet, even?
Everybody worries their well's getting dry as they get older.
Yep.
But I can tell you that under the right circumstances, you can have a well as wet as it's ever been. And I think everyone who's creative, you have your dry spells, and you think to yourself, that's it, it's over, never again. I had a fairly dry spell quite recently, and you want to keep the muscles going. It's sort of like anything else, any other sort of exertion, really. It is a muscle, and the more you work it, the better it is. And so I was trying to sort of keep making music myself just to sort of stay limber. And I mean, I was making stuff, but it was not particularly good. And then, funnily enough, I got this raft of commissions. And it turns out money's really great for wetting up your well. But it was such a relief. I had this genuine period of thinking, like you, that's it. It's over, pack it all up, it's all done. And actually I ended up producing, it's not a huge spectrum, but some of the best music I've ever made.
Wow. In
the last month or so. I did some music for Lego for their social media. You can, if you have a look at the Lego, I think it's at Lego on Instagram, they've got a New Year's reel, and they wanted a sort of happy and chaotic arrangement of Auld Lang Syne, which the director observed is really dreary.
It is when you think, I suppose it's one of those pieces of music that's in the psyche, isn't it? It's just there. It's like Rule Britannia. Yeah. And it doesn't really, I guess, it only makes you think of New Year.
But when you actually sort of pull it apart, and this is always the thing that's really interesting, is when you get asked to do either an arrangement of an existing tune or a sound-alike, you start to kind of really get into the DNA of a piece of music. And that's when you really discover what's going on under the hood. Also in the last month, I did a series for Radio 4 called We Forced a Bot to Write This Show, which is, it purports to be written by AI. And of course it isn't, because if it was written by AI, it would just be sort of competent but banal. Whereas this is sort of just funny gibberish. And so they gave me the funny gibberish lyrics in a variety of song styles and said, can you set these to music? And I did a power ballad, sort of an 80s power ballad. I did a country song. I did a sea shanty, and I did Simon and Garfunkel. And what's fascinating about Simon and Garfunkel, of whom I remain a fan, but when you pull at the thread of that, there is nothing going on there musically. I mean, I love Paul Simon, and his later stuff I really, really love. But boy, oh boy, there's nothing happening musically.
There's a lot of harmony in there. The guitar parts aren't exactly easy.
It's very, very simple. It's very basic stuff. And you suddenly realize it's kind of folk origins, I suppose. And I mean, I can play you a bit of what I did if you like.
Oh, I like it, yeah.
Sitting on a rock station with a bridge to another station. La la la. In my hand there is an island.
And it was hard.
My other hand is
trying to sort of hit every point, every musical trope.
So here's to you. This is destination. Cancer like 10,000 people, maybe more. In in a subway fill of homeward waters.
I wanted to make the crash a little bit bigger each time.
I am a rock band. And a groovy island that's escaping silently. La la la. A groovy island that's escaping silently.
Beautiful.
That is beautiful.
What was really fun was as I say, seeing that there's really not a lot happening in a Simon Garfunkel song, but you want to try and hit every one of those tropes. And that's the thing with music, particularly short pieces of music, is you have to try to articulate quite a lot in a short period of time and make that work musically.
Let's talk about music in podcasts, because I think, and I was talking about this a little bit earlier on, I think a lot of people use it because they feel they have to, and it just adds a little bit of something at the start and kind of at the end. But I think, personally, I think it's more than that. I think you can use it to illustrate so much, not just the punctuation in the different bits of your podcast, but I think you can also, obviously, emotion. That seems like such an obvious thing to say, but I think in this podcast, I've proved that does work. What are your thoughts on this? How do you take a piece of music in your mind and fit it around speech? Because that's what we're talking about here. Yeah. People in radio do it all the time. How does it work for you?
I think with podcasts, it's a really interesting musical proposition, because it's not just about emotion. Like, what you can do to manipulate emotion with music is of course really powerful, really interesting, and we see that, I guess that started with opera, and cinema took it, and everyone else. But I think that specifically with a podcast is that what you're trying to do, the reason that people stay with a podcast is very rarely to do with the content. It's to do with the personality of the person. It's, do I like this person? Do I want to spend time with them? More than almost any other medium, I think. I guess I would say YouTube would be another equivalent. And music can be a very effective way at not just conveying an emotion, but actually conveying the personality of your podcast. It's about very quickly establishing who I want you to see me as a podcaster, but also how I want you to approach me. How I want you to approach this. Am I sitting down to something big or small? Is this intimate or is this showbiz? And there are some. I'll give you two contrasting examples, if you like. So, I did this for a podcast that's about history on film, and they wanted something kind of big. So that's that. You don't hear any more of that. But you kind of want that sort of, I guess, 60s, 70s British cinema going experience of kind of like Pearl and Dean, all of that sort of stuff going on. Compare that to the Hoovering podcast, which is hosted by Jessica Fostekew. She's a very big character, and she can be quite acerbic. She's a stand-up comedian, and she can be quite acerbic, but her podcast she really didn't want it to feel like that. And I missed the brief the first time because I sort of thought, well, I know Jess. And so I came out with something that was quite punchy, and that's not what she wanted at all. And this is what she ended up going for. It's about food, which is why there's a pepper grinder in there. It goes on. But so it's really interesting in terms of how you're setting out your stall as a podcast with music. It is all about what expectation you're setting up in your listener and what kind of relationship you want them to have with it. And Jess really wanted something that felt very intimate, very safe, very friendly, very warm. And so I had to think about how to do that. And,
as I think you've already brilliantly demonstrated here, is that you make bespoke music for podcasts. What a great job to have. So when somebody comes to you with a brief, just like that, what are the steps you go through to, obviously not directly with Jess, there were a couple of steps there. Obviously you had to go through to reread the brief. But what steps do you go through to deliver what somebody wants? Because I assume somebody, maybe a lot of people come to you and they're quite vague.
Yes. Yeah, they can be. And there can be a high degree of trial and error. The History on Film podcast, I think that was, I can see from the file name, it was the fourth go at it that I had to have, because people, there's a real art to briefing people into music commissions in terms of saying what you want. I did one, I think it was called In Other News, and the guy said, I want a big orchestral news theme, but I want it with hip hop beats. And that's really straightforward. You can just do that. But when people sort of say, I want it to feel kind of, I don't know, retro or lively or funky or whatever, it's very helpful if people have a sort of guide piece that they like. That can be really useful. But then, as much as anything else, a lot of the time it's about the instrumentation and the feel of it. That Hoovering podcast, I deliberately kept it really close. So you'll notice on it there's very little reverb, which is, it's what people often think is echo. It's that kind of washy sound that you get if you shout in a church. There's almost none in that, so that the space feels small. It feels like we're sitting here in someone's living room and keeping it close and friendly. And so then it's just finding a hook that kind of presents itself and building outwards from there, really.
It's fascinating.
But the other thing then, what's really fun is once you've got that idea, and often I'll do just a very rough version saying, look, this is not the finished thing, but this is just the feel. And if they like that, then I'll go on and I'll develop that and finish that. And often with a podcast is people will buy a package of music, and that's where it can be really great. If you work with a composer, one thing that I think makes it worth it is that you can give your podcast a kind of feel that is coherent. So for the Hoovering podcast, I did a lot of, that was a big package, because she has all these kind of format points. She does a little quiz at the end, or she does like your letters or stuff like that. And she wanted a piece of music for each one of those, and she wanted some little stings to break up different segments of the podcast. And because she was working with me, and I could build all of that. So I think this is her quick fire questions, but I don't even remember what this sounds like. But it's the same beat. So I just pulled out some elements from the original theme, and while it's a different piece of music, it's got the same feel, the same instrumentation, and it makes your podcast feel like just it's got some kind of cohesion and hangs together.
Jake, it's been absolutely lovely talking to you. It feels like a long time since we last spoke, so it's been wonderful.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Jake Yapp there, and if you would like to get in touch with Jake, you can find him at jakeyapp.co.uk. And you heard me and Jake talk a bit about punctuation, and in fact I've talked about it a bit anyway in this episode. That little bit of music at the end of the interview was punctuation. Let me demonstrate. Using the music to separate two bits of chat, like this. So that's punctuation. It's also worth going back over something we were chatting about there as well. Music is protected by licensing, and you can't just use what you like, no matter how tempting it is. Maybe you can if your budget is huge, but for most people, a music library is definitely the way to go. Whatever you do, though, do not use music by commercial artists and think it'll be fine. If their lawyers hear it on your show, you've not paid for it, you could end up with a bill for thousands and thousands of pounds, so watch out. But here at Ginger Wizard Productions, we have full access to music libraries and can think about this for you. Drop me a line, nick@gingerwizard.co.uk. In the next episode, I'll be telling you all about editing. I'll be telling you all about editing.